There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello out there in YouTube and podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about horror movies and science fiction films and those key elements that lift and or separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, David and I have been talking about movies since germs crawled out of the sea and developed legs.
Leggy germs.
Yeah,
Yes.
leggy germs. We have enjoyed it for so much and for so long that we decided we would start sharing it with people out there in cyberland. We, as far as our approach, we wanted to include the entirety, basically, of cinema history. So we go decade to decade, not necessarily chronologically, but you'll find in a season of 40 episodes, we are at least in a single decade between the 1920s and the 2020s, at least once, sometimes multiple times, as in this season, I think we're in the 70s a lot. Today's topic is in the 80s. If you are returning, then you already know this and you like our format and you're curious to see what we're doing today. And that's why we're going to get right to it. And I'm with my co-host here, David Horton. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Great intro and lots of information there for everybody. So,
especially the germs crawling out of the sea thing.
The germs, the leggy germs, yes, is important. Normally for an icebreaker, say, what'd you do during your week? Did you do anything genre related that's not topical of today, but maybe just to get to know us a little bit. And those of you who are returning know that I have always liked, appreciated, and enjoyed a particular science fiction writer named J. Michael Straczynski.
Excuse me.
He was very prolific, still is very prolific, but is very prolific in crossing multiple media. So from television to comic books to novels to his autobiography is great, but mostly known for, and I will argue this with anyone, but mostly known for essentially creating the series-long arc storytelling that is now common and almost prior to Babylon 5, most series, they might have a two-part episode or they might have a crossover with a sister series or something, but most of them told independent weekly stories that you could watch in any order. There were no character arc builds. There was none of that. You might have lose a character or a character have a life crisis or whatever in a particular season, but it didn't affect the entire season. Straczynski pitched and got permission to do Babylon 5 with the intent that each season would be like one long book. Each episode would be a chapter in that book, and all 5 seasons would make up a 5-novel series with a beginning, middle, and end. And that was his intent. That's what he did. He also wrote, I think, 87% of the entire series. So since Rod Serling, one of the first authors to do that. Anyway, I say that because he's awesome. He's great. He's got a lot of cred. He has just got a new book out, which I just finished reading, called The Glass Box by J. Michael Straczynski. And it's pretty interesting.
That sounds very Harlan Ellison.
Well, he is, of course, the what do you
He's
call it?
He's a good friend of Harlan's, or was.
No, he's actually in charge of his estate. He's his... whatever you call it now, not a benefactor, but whoever takes over for a person's estate. So he's in charge of that and has helped with some of the new reprints of a lot of Harlan's work. And so, yeah, they were really good friends. And this is, I think you would like it, Tim, because it heavily relies on Cuckoo's Nest. It's
Really?
set in a future dystopia in America, which we're actually living in now. So this was written a year and a half ago, and it feels like it's relevant currently right now. It follows a female protagonist, and basically she's a bit of a rebel and a protester. She's protesting the government a lot. She's protesting senators and some of the acts of some of these shadowy organizations. Anyway, she gets arrested at a riot, essentially, or it was actually not a riot, but the press called it a riot. Sound familiar? And by some weird, shadowy authority, presidential order that came down, she becomes part of the American Renewal Centers, or the ARCs. And basically what they have done is they have privatized institutions, and they're turning them into prisons. Mental institutions, and turn them into prisons. And she has to go to one. And she thinks it's voluntary just for a year until they let her out. It turns out when she gets there that there's an authoritarian warden and there's terrible doctors. And it's her struggle to get out of this mental institution. So it's very Cuckoo's Nest-esque, but with a lot of like sci-fi trappings to it. And a lot of future dystopian feel of what the United States could easily turn into with the wrong people in power. So very topical for today. Glass Box, not totally science fiction, but pretty close, and by a great science fiction author. That's what I spent my time this week reading and getting finished with, and it's pretty good.
You were talking about television before you went into it and his influence on television.
Yeah.
And as soon as you read the title, the Harlan Ellison book, The Glass Teat, is about television. And he also did a book called Harlan Ellison is Watching. They're both nonfiction, and they're about current television or whatever, or television that he likes or dislikes. So it's very odd that Straczynski would write a fiction book about mental institutions with a similar title.
Yeah.
Strange.
Well, the Amazon review actually says he takes the reader on a mesmerizing journey inspired by pressing contemporary issues. So
interesting. It sounds cool.
It is. It's a really cool.
It sounds
novel.
suspenseful.
Very. It's the same thing as McMurphy. You're trying to figure out how is she going to get out of this and not be either more prosecuted or lobotomized. You know,
And it's a common motif in horror movies, going back to movies like Bedlam, which was, I believe, a Val Lewton movie with Boris Karloff about the Bethlehem Asylum in England back in the whatever hundreds. And this woman gets all smarty with this like rich dude that wants to sleep with her. And basically he just has Karloff put her in the asylum. And you're like, holy shit, get out. It's crazy.
Well, interesting. Didn't Straczynski, I need to go back and look, but I think he did. I think he wrote the screenplay for the movie about the actress that is put in the asylum against her will. Yeah.
Frances was Jessica Lange. She was institutionalized as well.
I'm pretty sure that he wrote that screenplay.
Yeah. Like I said, it's a common theme. You see it in movies every decade, probably, where someone's unjustly committed to an asylum and no one believes them, that they're not crazy or whatever. Yeah. Strange. Well, you went into asylums, and I was talking about germs crawling out of the sea. Yeah. So why not talk about Godzilla Minus One, which was my genre topic of the week.
Godzilla Minus One. Okay.
Yes. This one may sound familiar to you because it actually won an Academy Award.
I'd heard it had.
A couple of years ago. This is of a new batch of Godzilla films coming out of Japan. There's so many now, I really can't keep up with them. I think when we covered the original, we said it was the largest franchise that had more than 30 movies in it, including Japanese and American movies. This movie's a lot of fun. It's a retelling of the original film. It's set after World War II, and it has incredible special effects, which is what won, I'm pretty sure, what the Oscar was for. It's directed by Takashi Yamazaki, and it was written by him. And of course, Ishiro Honda is credited as well because he wrote the original Godzilla. The cast is Japanese, so we don't know any of them. And a synopsis is Japan has barely recovered from the Second World War when a gigantic peril emerges off the coast of Tokyo. Koichi, a deserter, traumatized by his first confrontation with Godzilla, which was actually during the war, sees this as an opportunity to redeem his conduct for being a deserter during the war.
Oh, okay.
So they add some story to it, a little more story than just the scientist and his girlfriend that we had in the original. The movie gets 99% on Rotten Tomatoes, and I can see why. It won an Oscar for visual effects. My one gripe, though, is it suffers from being similar to the original, and that is that it's got a lot of weird Japanese melodrama that I guess is just a cultural thing. Because you're watching this modern movie with these great special effects, and then the characters do something really bizarre, which just takes it out of context a little bit. The best thing going for it, though, is Godzilla's a badass villain again, and that's why I enjoyed it. That plus all the special effects and stuff. So, yeah, highly recommend it.
He's not the, oh, we need to feel sorry for the poor monster Godzilla.
No, he's out there, and when he comes through the city, it is just leveled wherever he it's like a hay field where a car drives through. It's just nothing left in his path. So
well,
it's
standard for Gahira or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I did in my genre week. Good luck with a segue.
Well, I have one set up, which is you saw this terrifying monster movie and I read this very frightening dystopian novel. What would be really cool is if you could experience what I experienced when I read it, or if I could experience what you experienced when you read it. So that is a segue.
That would be amazing.
To the topic of today. We are going to 1983's Brainstorm, directed by Douglas Trumbull. It was written by Bruce Rubin, Robert Zeitzel, and Philip Frank Messina, and probably about 10 other people as well. When we go into it, this movie had a terrible production time and crisis. But if you haven't watched it, we are going to spoil it, so please go watch it right now and then come back. This is Brainstorm, 1983, and it starred Christopher Walken, Natalie Wood, Louise Fletcher, among others, a bunch of other people, everything.
Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah. Speaking of Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, Louise Fletcher.
A brief synopsis of it is you've got two scientists, Michael Brace and Lillian Reynolds, played respectively by Christopher Walken and Louise Fletcher. They develop a system which allows the recording and playback of a person's thoughts onto a videotape type machine. Remember, this is 1983. For those of you youngsters, videotape was how we used to have to watch movies, and you could record them. The concept here is that it records everything, not just what you see, but what you feel, taste, hear, think, everything, which they think will be great for applications in the medical field and communications, technology. But of course, their boss is a nefarious boss who wants to sell it to the military for military applications. This becomes especially relevant when Dr. Reynolds has a heart attack. And as she's having the heart attack, she decides to put the device on and record herself. And it not only records the entire intricacies of her death, but what lies beyond her death. And the rest of the movie is Brace, the Walken character, fighting to gain control of the tape, to stop the military from using it as a huge weapon of destruction, and to find out what's on it, what lies beyond death is the potential of this particular tape. And that's basically it in a nutshell, without giving too much away. I know you have seen this movie before. Do you remember
I'm quite certain I saw it with you, either in a theater or on videotape.
I think we watched it on videotape because I fairly remember. I remember us talking about the fact that we're watching a thing that records videotape on videotape.
Yeah, and it didn't stay in theaters long. It was not a very
No,
popular movie, so
it
we
was not
probably
at all.
missed it on a theatrical run.
Yep, yep. It did not have a good production history. You remember
Just
the first time you saw it?
do I, like I said, it's probably on videotape with you. I think we saw it
Yeah.
together, and honestly, I think we both liked it.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure we both liked it. We thought it was very inventive to actually record dreams and or conscious subconsciousness, and we thought it was unfairly treated because, for those of you that don't know, one of the stars, Natalie Wood, died before this movie was completed, and so they tried to bury it because of her dying. I'm sure David will get into some more of the details of that. And so we were like, why are they trying to kill this movie? It's actually pretty good. That's my original memory of it. Now, what I think of it now will be a little bit different.
Well, what do you think of it now?
It's not as good as I remember at all. As a matter of fact, even some of the performances are a little over the top, and the script doesn't really, it's not very cohesive from scene to scene. See, you're seeing everything I'm seeing. Yeah, it's kind of a mess.
It is, unfortunately. It's a grand idea, ill-conceived, I
Excuse me.
think. Because, like you said, performances are very erratic and very over the top. The editing is terrible. The story itself doesn't build. And some of that I credit to the production troubles and what happened. But some of it is also in the creator. It's got to go back to Trumbull. And the fact that even the film stock that he chose looks like bad television of the 80s. It's not very good and cinematic and whatever, which is sad because of the impetus of this project. So Trumbull was a special effects genius, and I totally agree with that. This is a guy who has credits going back to 2001 and several other major films that he contributed to. And this was originally pitched to, let me go back to, let me see if I can find it in my notes where it was. This was originally pitched to Warner's, and it was going to be a showcase for a new technology that he had developed. So remember in 75, Lucas and his not even then ILM, but the guys that became ILM, developed the motion controlled camera, a camera that would go and follow and could repeat, using a computer, could repeat passes so you could do better special effects. That came as the offshoot of Trumbull's work in 2001 with computer control for the slit scan effect, which is that weird Jupiter and beyond into the the multicolor in my face effects. Trumbull developed those in 2001. So Lucas took it to motion controlled. What Trumbull wanted to do was what he called show scan, which was a particular type of projection processing. So basically movies were shot in 35 millimeter, some were shot in 70 millimeter. If they were in 70 millimeter, then they had special lenses, special projectors, special screens at theaters. What Trumbull wanted to do was take 70 millimeter, but shoot it at 60 frames a second. That's 2.5 times faster than the normal frame rate of a film. So most films in 35 or 70 is 24 frames a second. That's what the eye gets. We like it. It works for us. He wanted 3 times faster than that. It would have made the cinema experience incredible. And he thought this was a cool idea to do that. So shoot the movie in regular 70 millimeter, regular 24 frames. But then when they put the headset on and you're getting their POV experience, it goes to show scan, which is at 60 frames a second and is incredible and blah, blah, blah. Naturally, that didn't happen. He couldn't afford it, mostly because the studio came back to him and said, so you want us to tell all of our theater distribution chain that they need to change their projectors so that it'll do your new technology. And he was going, well, yeah, they'll have to do that. And that's not going to happen. So that was his first hurdle. So he ended up having to make it okay, so I'll shoot the whole thing in 35 and then go to 70 millimeter aspect ratio for the experience, which he did, which we experienced, and which is cool. That works for me.
And the effects were good for the time. They were actually probably really good for the time. I seem to remember thinking this movie is gorgeous when they go into those dream sequences or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And again, that may be a choice he made with a very muted color tone and look to every other scene. But then the brainstorm scenes are amazing. What was the name of the device? I can't remember. I don't have it in my notes right now.
I can't remember either.
But they call the device something. But when they go into that experience, it's heightened and colorful and amazing. And he also went into full, like 5 quadraphonic sound for those sequences too. We don't get that now looking at it on our televisions, but it was a huge deal in the theaters where it was presented because suddenly the audio would change as well. And it's just, so that was just the first hurdle that he had to deal with, was his original vision of how to even project the film ended up not being how it could be. But eventually he got funding of it. He got it approved, went ahead. He started casting, got a great cast for it, or a big cast for it, I should say, which you'll go into. Went through principal
I don't think it had a name. I'm looking right now. It's just referred to as the headpiece in what I'm looking at.
Well, let's just call it the headset then. So
yeah, it is like a headset.
Go cray-cray. They filmed in North Carolina, which I remember us talking about when we watched it on videotape, that was really cool. That was only right over there in North Carolina that they filmed it.
Yeah, they were filming a lot of Stephen King movies over there in Wilmington around this time. They were trying to make Wilmington, North Carolina, Hollywood East, and it never really took off. They did it in the 80s for a while, and that was it.
Yeah, they really wanted that to happen. And
yeah, I actually drove over and looked around those studios, and they were tiny.
Well, where was King Kong shot, the sequel one that you did? Was that in Tennessee or was that in North Carolina?
The sequel was in Tennessee because I was in it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I don't know where the original 1978 remake was shot, or 76 remake, yeah.
Well, for Brainstorm, he got his money, he got his cast, he got his approval, so they began shooting in North Carolina. Some really cool design buildings there that they shot in and did a lot of the exteriors especially. And then they all packed up, went to LA to shoot all of their LA scenes, their interiors and stuff like that. They were about 3 weeks away from the end of production, and everyone took a Thanksgiving Day break for the whole weekend. Unfortunately, during that break is when Natalie Wood died. And her death is still shrouded in mystery.
It's a huge controversy.
Her death still has a lot of rumors about it, a lot of stuff, mostly because she was on their yacht, her and her husband's yacht, and they also invited Walken for the evening to come and party on their yacht with them.
And Robert Wagner is her husband. He's also a famous actor.
Yeah. And when Robert and Christopher got up the next morning, they could not find Natalie, ended up a few hours later finding her body drowned in the ocean. And a lot of controversy went from that.
Well, there was also waking up during the night, hearing her scream. There's supposedly an affair between her and Walken, and possibly Robert murdered her. There's all kinds of shit going on. And if you want this stuff, just Google it because it's out there. And nothing was ever proved other than the fact
No, it is still an open case as far as I know. I don't think, because there was something odd about it, too, that I vaguely remember, like the coroner couldn't rule out foul play, but he also couldn't totally classify it as a homicide or something. So it was never filed or closed. It's still left as an open case. And that's sad because I'm sure you'll get into it when we get into casting, but she was amazing. She's just a great person. But the next morning, essentially, MGM locked down every set, every editing bay, everything. They froze the production totally. First of all, until some investigation could be done, the police could do their thing, yada, yada, yada. But also, they were getting very cold feet about it.
Maybe they saw what we see now.
Well, Natalie Wood had completed most of her scenes. There were still a few scenes that she needed to do, but even according to Trumbull, he was thrown off because literally he could not even get onto the sets. He was locked out of everything, and you had to have special permission from the studio and all of that. So he has stated since then that he believes MGM just wanted to collect on the insurance. They just wanted to get their $10 million back for doing it.
And this is very topical, too, when you consider, like last year, was it, Batwoman? That
yes.
they did the same thing. They shut it down so that they could collect the insurance on it or something.
Yep. Yep. But being stubborn and wanting to see the dream that he had already started fulfilled, Trumbull went behind the studio's back and went to Lloyd's of London and said, I want to do this movie. I just need about $3 million to finish it, and I can do this movie. So this Lloyd's of London, which was the insurer, said they didn't want to pay for the insurance claim on this. They wanted the production to go forward, and they put it up 3.5 or 2.7 million to let Trumbull finish it. So, of course, MGM said, sure, fine, that's okay. If we're not going to get our 10 million, you can spend your 3 million and see it done. But that ended the studio support totally for Trumbull. So he didn't have support doing it. Dailies were constantly critiqued and told that stuff was bad and things were wrong. And he was forced to do a bunch of new stuff. He had to rewrite the 3 scenes that Natalie Wood was still supposed to be in and give that dialogue to other characters and rework it and change it a little bit. That's why in the movie, the guy that has the friend of theirs that puts what I call puts together the orgasm tape, he went away. And then suddenly in the last act, he comes back.
Yeah.
Right? That was supposed to be Natalie Wood. All of those scenes were supposed to be Natalie Wood doing all of that. And
isn't it her and him together?
There are 2 scenes prior, like in the golf course.
They do split up. You're right.
They're on the golf course when he's talking to Bryce about what can you do to get it back. Well, here's what you need to do, and here's how you need to do it, and blah, 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 blah. That was supposed to be Natalie Wood. And there was another scene where he takes over her dialogue for them. But they had already filmed the climax. They had already filmed the final scene. They had already filmed a lot of the stuff. They had also already filmed a couple of swimming pool love scenes, and they had filmed a canoeing scene. So those went away. Anything having to do with water went away in the editing.
Right, because it was too controversial.
Had to rewrite, had to redo, and then had to edit it and put it all together. And that shows, it suffers. Like you said, the editing doesn't work. In places, there's timing issues that don't play out. There's things that don't seem to work. And the only other thing that I'll add, because it eventually was released, but the reception was not good at all. It did not have a great reception. It was not released until 2 years after Natalie's death, by the way. So that's part of the problem. And the studio sabotaged him and was trying to play it up. He just wanted the movie released and wanted almost like a legacy piece, but they extremely lauded and tried to push it officially as Natalie Wood's last movie, which also kept people away, actually, because they didn't want to be reminded of it and everything else. But so sadly, it was very well received. It was not a commercial success. It had a final budget of $18 million. That includes all the advertising. It only grossed $10 in ticket sales.
And I don't think they put a lot of advertising into it, honestly.
No. But sadly, the worst thing about it was Natalie Wood's death. That wasn't really because of this movie, but was tied to it. But the other worst thing that came out of this was Douglas Trumbull essentially swore off Hollywood. said he would never make another movie, and he never did.
He never did.
He instead went to the theme park industry, which helped them, and designed special effects for theme parks. But he didn't do a movie again. And that's sad, because Silent Running is great, and we've actually done it on the podcast.
I was going to say, I need to update our director's list, because this is the second movie we've done of his. No. Didn't he do 2010 too? No.
No, he didn't do 2010. That was
okay.
It was somebody else.
It was somebody else in the 80s. But yeah, so this is the second film we've done of his. Yeah.
Yeah. And the topicality of this technology and everything else is so prescient now with virtual reality and everything else. Mm-hmm. It really is. This movie is, I think, is rife for a reboot or a remake.
Yeah, just don't use videotape.
Yeah, just don't use videotape, and don't let anybody die.
No, you just upload things to the cloud or whatever. Yeah, a near-death experience.
Production trivia. Do you know what the videotape was?
It's very shiny.
Yeah, it's packaging ribbon. It's packaging ribbon
that
we
makes
still
sense.
have today, and he had to design special spools and spindles that would hold it, so he could hit them with his little laser guide, and it looks like it's recording.
Yeah, it's very prismatic. Yeah,
yeah, which is cool.
How funny.
But that's the whole production process in a nutshell, glossed over. We have conflict with it, but is there scenes that you did like? Or scenes that you specifically didn't like?
Probably both. Before I move on to that, I was going to mention that I didn't realize that Trumbull was the son of a special effects designer. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No. Who?
His name is Don Trumbull, and he did effects for Life Force, which had great effects, but was a terrible movie.
It was a terrible movie.
Yeah. But he also did the effects for Star Wars and Spaceballs. So his father was in the industry as an effects guy, too. That's how Douglas got his start before he became a director. I guess he was going to the sets with his dad.
Sense? Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. And then you mentioned Bruce Joel Rubin wrote this. He's not a bad writer. He won an Oscar for Ghost in the 90s. So it had a decent writer. I think it's like you...
Was that a deserved Oscar, Tim?
I don't
come
know.
on. Ghost? Really?
David, it's a romance. It's your favorite.
Yeah. Lift the penny. Lift the penny. Okay.
But anyway, so I don't know that it's so much the script as it is, and like you said, so many hands in the pot, not just with the script because they were trying to fix things, but with everything, because this was the perfect storm of disaster, really, for a movie. Everything seemed to have went wrong with this.
Yeah, we talked about Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula and a couple others that he liked rehearsals. And we've talked before with different directors. Some of them love rehearsal, some of them don't. Spielberg likes a mix. He likes a little bit of table read and rehearsal, and then let's get to the set and play. But other directors really like rehearsals. When they were in North Carolina, Trumbull had 2 weeks of rehearsals and table reads with his actors. And so much so that then Walken came back with pages and pages and pages of changes and ideas and thoughts and stuff like this. And Trumbull is trying to handle the technology and handle this and handle them. And supposedly one of the things I read said that the crew was communicating back to MGM saying, the inmates are running the asylum. The actors are totally taking over, and he's more focused on the shot and the technology than he is on their characters and working with them. And that is very apparent in Christopher Walken's performance.
I think it's apparent in a lot of their performances. As a matter of fact, we mentioned before last week when we ended that we teased that this was filled with high caliber actors, that most of these actors are either Oscar winners or Oscar nominees.
Yep.
So they had a lot of clout compared to Trumbull, who really, he would have been an easy stepping stone because he was not a Spielberg or an Alfred Hitchcock that could control high profile actors. So that's
Agreed.
just another step or another ingredient to this maelstrom of disaster, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as scenes, I think the biggest scene is probably going to be Louise Fletcher's death. Where, but it goes on way too long. I'm like, how long are you going to have this heart attack? Long enough to light a cigarette, get in a chair, and record it?
Yeah, I would have had her not have to come down the steps in the chair and all of that. That was
right.
It was long. It was.
But I love Louise Fletcher. It's great. I don't know that we've ever covered a movie with her in it, but we know her, of course, as Nurse Ratched from Cuckoo's Nest.
She's extremely strong, but
smoking in every scene. She got a cigarette constantly,
which I think that shows that the actors are in the studio and the director running the shoot, and the director doesn't have a good control over it, because that was unnecessary.
No,
it almost became humorous, the fact that she does have a cigarette in every freaking scene all the time,
right?
And that was either her nerves and didn't know that, oh, the scene you just were in, you were smoking a cigarette as well, by the way. Do you know that? Or just bad coordination in general. But I also read she was so interested and in-depth in it, she actually spent quite a little while interviewing people who had experienced near-death experiences and had experienced heart attacks, so she could relate to them on how it really felt and what were your reactions and what did you do and all of that. And I remember the first time watching this going, ooh, that's a really realistic looking heart attack. And since I have had one, I do now know, yeah, mine was not the same way, but once the pain hits, the pain hits. And it's just like that.
Wow.
So yeah, I thought that is probably the stellar scene of the movie.
Yeah, the whole camera lifting up above her and looking down it just plays into that, I don't know what you would call it, the urban legend or whatever, that we always see ourselves as we're leaving our bodies or whatever. You feel that when you see her die. You relate to it, I guess is what I'm looking for.
Oh, yeah.
But there's other scenes that are great, too. I love that the guy decides he's just going to have an orgasm loop. And he just basically lays in a chair and has an orgasm for 24 hours and almost dies himself because...
Yeah, probably a little dehydrated. But yeah, I remember thinking about it going, okay, that is something that is so human that someone would do, and it would happen. And we say that, if you haven't seen the movie, then we're giving it all away, so I don't know why you listen. But the reason that he does that is because the other lab technician is stealing the headset and going and doing all of these things and having all these lovemaking sessions and recording it all. Mm-hmm. And this guy takes all of the primo events of all those exploits.
Yeah,
and
he makes like a mixtape of the best scenes of porn, basically, of the porn the guy's experiencing, and experiences it for himself. And
that's one of my scenes. I agree with you on that one. And one of my other ones, which is a mixed scene, it's a cool idea, but I think bad, is the first scene when they're experimenting with the helmet, and he's going, the lab tech is going to eat different things from the chef, and he's going to do different things and all that. However, I hate that character. That character is like the one in Dawn of the Dead that I hate, the sergeant or whatever, who's so annoying, and not that...
Or the one that's near the helicopter pad when they're taking off and he wants cigarettes, that guy?
Helicopter pad, he wants cigarettes. The one that's always laughing in the background, the goofy one that's always laughing. In Dawn
you mean Day of the Dead. You said Dawn of the Dead.
Sorry,
okay.
Day.
Yeah.
Day of the Dead.
Yeah, he is like that. He's very cartoonish. Yeah.
And I hate that character. And he is so cartoony all the way through this. It doesn't... I do like the fact that when they're forcing him to wear the headset at the same time that Brace is putting on the headset to experience the tape, except he's turned off the protocols. So he's turned off the biometrics. So all he can do is see what Louise Fletcher's character saw.
And not feel it.
But what they don't know is their entire lab is being tapped into by the military over in their little secret headquarters, and they take the lab tech and put the headset on him and say, do the same thing, except he doesn't have the protocols removed. We all know what's happening. And then in like 2 scenes later, have you heard from so-and-so? No, well, he died. He had a heart attack and blah, 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 blah. And it was like, yep. And I like the fact that they did that. They didn't have to show him die. We knew it was happening. That was smart scripting. But some of the few in this, that's smart scripting.
But other scenes that I hate.
Oh, yeah, there are those.
The whole, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. The whole E.T. gang, let's get them with we'll go to his house and we'll tap in here. And all of that stuff annoys the piss out of me because they make it seem like they're either super geniuses or it's just that easy to do what they're doing, which is getting this data back from the military.
The last third of this movie is very 80s heisty feel to me. It, like you said, it's very E.T., we can do it, here's our plan. Yeah. And it's very buffoonish in the comedy. All of the destruction of the lab, the manufacturing
Oh my God, yeah, I forgot about that.
Is terrible with the suds.
It's like Short Circuit.
Yeah, yes. Very good. Great key. Very good.
There's your key, excuse me.
Very good key in comparison because it's just buffoonish and it takes away from the characters that we've seen before and their intelligence level and everything else. And I also think one of the ones that's a disappointment to me, that final scene should have been either 2001 ambiguous so we don't know what to think or more profound than it was. Because I don't think the effects of...
You're talking about when Walken is actually viewing everything from a phone booth?
Yes, and he's actually seeing after death.
And Natalie dramatically revives him. Yeah, it's so hokey.
And it's suddenly the end, and we're done. And I'm like, really? That was it?
She died, David.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's a good thing he didn't have her put on the headset. Oh, no, never mind. But yeah, so I guess that's it for scenes.
There's plenty of bad scenes, and you just reminded me of all that chaos with the laboratory and them tapping in and having everything go haywire, to the fact that there's like soap suds and people slipping like in a Laurel and Hardy movie. I was like, this is stupid. Yeah.
I was going, is this Brainstorm or The Great Race? I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, it's bad.
And then there are some good sequences, though, and good scenes. Again, most of them with Louise Fletcher, all of her dynamics with especially the Cliff Robertson character and the fights and all that are really good.
I think you could sum it up by saying character stuff and special effects were the standouts in this. And everything else is pretty ridiculous.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah.
Good. So
I can move on to cast if you're ready.
Yeah.
We're not going to have to say a lot. They're very well known. I have a note. I'm not really sure if I should read it. It's in casting. It says in 1973, screenwriter Bruce Joel Rubin was set to direct his script, then titled The George Dunlap Tape. Have you heard about this?
Vaguely. I remember that. Okay. I remember reading that.
He raised $400,000, secured the locations in Indiana using the university, had props built. He cast Lorinda Barrett as Karen Brace, Woody Eney as Michael Brace, Fred Holliday as Hal Abramson, and Jacqueline Brookes as Lillian Reynolds, and assembled an FX team that included Jordan Belson, John Whitney, and Scott Bartlett. Just as shooting was about to commence, the primary investor withdrew their funds and the production collapsed. So there was a prior movie set to be filmed of this exact story without this cast, and it fell through. So that's why
I wonder how Rubin and Trumbull hooked up.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
As far as cast, though, the movie that we did see that came about does feature Christopher Walken as Dr. Michael Brace. I don't think we've covered a movie with him in it yet. We need to do The Dead Zone because that's one of Stephen King's better movies, and he's in it. Most people know him from The Deer Hunter and other 70s movies where he became a critic darling, I guess you would say.
I'm not a Christopher Walken fan. I never have been. I think he's very good at parodying himself, and he had such an eclectic speech pattern that it became a thing he could play up on. I do think he's multi-talented as far as he can sing, he can dance, he can act.
I really liked him in The Dead Zone. I think his performance in The Dead Zone is great. A lot of people thought the role should have been reversed with Martin Sheen playing the good guy and him playing the bad guy. I disagree. I kind of like the way they cast that. And that's Cronenberg.
Well, he plays the Emperor in Dune 2, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm afraid that it's going to ruin it for me.
The ice is going to break. The sand is going to blow.
Yeah, there you go. He was a terrible Bond villain. I remember him from Deer Hunter, and he was fine in that, but it was...
I always thought of him as like a John Voight. He's like the brunette version of John Voight.
Very good. That's a great key.
He's not that memorable, and neither is John Voight. I will say that I remember him most from whenever he hosted Saturday Night Live because he was hysterical on those.
Cowbell.
Yeah. Well, that and the whole... smoking jacket guy that the camera would follow into the room while he was trying to seduce you. That stuff was really funny to me. So that's what I remember him for. The true star. What's that?
I do think his speech in Pulp Fiction is great. But I think that says more about...
It's a monologue, but yeah.
Yeah. That says more about Tarantino knowing Walken and working with him and getting the right words at the right meter.
That's the one about the toy, isn't it?
It's the one about the ring. He carried the ring.
Oh, that's right. It's a ring. It's not a toy. Okay. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. From Vietnam. Yeah.
But that movie's an ensemble, so everybody's strong in it. The next person, of course, is Natalie Wood. I cannot say enough about Natalie Wood. I love her, even though she's wasted in this movie. She was a child star. She was in Miracle on 34th Street. She was the girl that was kidnapped in John Ford's The Searchers. She was in Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean. And she's in my favorite movie of all time, West Side Story. So she... is not the reason, well, other than the fact that she died, she is not responsible for this train wreck.
No.
I think she just got a bad script because most of the time, and this is a good example, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but like in the beginning, it's clear they both work like in the same place, but it's not clear whether or not they are... what their relationship is, and then all of a sudden they're just best friends. And I'm like, wait a minute, there was a little bit more conflict in the beginning. What happened to that? It just got thrown out the window.
She does best in that last act, in those scenes where she's in control and she's doing stuff and she's stronger, rather than the opening of it where it is so ambiguous and we're not
and
sure.
she's just carrying around a briefcase or whatever. Yeah.
And she's going, here's my headset design. Do you like it? That's my line for this scene.
It's like their relationship was just odd to me. Anyway, Natalie Wood, rest in peace. Louise, rest in peace. Everyone in this movie's dead except for Walken, I think. True. Anyway, Louise Fletcher played Dr. Lillian Reynolds. We know her best from her Oscar-winning performance as Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. However, she's done her bad Stephen King movies like Firestarter. She also did Flowers in the Attic, the V.C. Andrews horror movie, as well as Exorcist II, The Heretic. So she's a genre babe. We just haven't got to her that much. Cliff Robertson plays...
Well, she is also well known for science fiction because she had a recurring role in Deep Space Nine as the Bajoran religious leader. She was Kai Wynn. And she was a great villain to hate. Everybody loved every episode she was in because she was so horrible, and it was great to hate her.
Was she smoking?
No, no smoking.
Cliff Robertson plays Alex Turson. We know him, or modern audiences probably remember him best from playing Uncle Ben in the Spider-Man movies that Sam Raimi did at the turn of the century. Yep. However, he goes way back to a movie you've brought up a few times called Charlie.
Yeah. Based on the novel Flowers for Algernon.
By Bradbury, right?
No, I don't think it's Bradbury.
It's not Bradbury. I just always confuse it with Dandelion Wine. Anyway, Cliff Robertson's an excellent actor. We last saw him, and we have seen him recently. We saw him in Superman. He played Pa Kent in Superman. And then the only other one, really, I need to pull this up because I didn't put it in there, is Joe Dorsey, played Hal Abramson. He's the one that did the sex tape that ends up collaborating and helping them, or helping Natalie Wood and Christopher, I can't even think of their fucking character's name, Brace and his ex-wife or whatever, get the tape so that he can see it. So those are the cast. As far as awards, it was nominated for Saturn Awards with the Academy of Sci-Fi, Fantasy, and Horror. 6 in total for film. Louise Fletcher as actress, supporting actress Wood, director James Horner for music and special effects. And Louise Fletcher won and James Horner won. So it did win Saturn Awards. So it was not ignored by the Academy of SFF and H. The Avoyaz Fantastic Film Festival nominated it for a grand prize, and the Hugos nominated it for Best Dramatic Presentation. It did not win, and it is not on the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die, which is completely understandable.
Yep.
That is all I have as far as casting and awards, which, well, is also understandable. Do you have any trivia?
No, nothing other than the stuff that I did. A lot of the equipment that you see was also designed and built by Trumbull and his studio. So the headsets and the changes in the headsets and everything else, and even down to the designs for like the helmet manufacturing gear using big industrial arms and gimbal arms and all of that. A lot of that was using current, at the time, gimbal arms, having to adapt them into this application. So it wasn't just visual effects that he was doing. It was mechanical effects.
A lot of clunky robotics, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the same thing with like control room controls and using different pads for control systems and all of that. But other than that, no, I don't really have any trivia from it.
I have his actual quote of why he no longer makes movies.
Which is?
He says, I have no interest in doing other Hollywood films, absolutely none. The movie business is so totally screwed up that I just don't have the energy to invest 3 or 4 years in a feature film. Movie making is like waging war. It destroys your personal life too. The people who can survive the process of making films have largely given up their personal lives in order to do that, just because it's such a battle to make a movie. And in doing so, they've isolated themselves from the very audience that they're trying to reach.
Wow.
You could tell he was pissed off.
Well, he was mostly backstabbed all the way through it. It was hard to get it going at first, and then his original vision was cut back to 35 millimeter, and then it was just every day was a slog, and he felt like the studio was not on his side, and literally they weren't. After Natalie died, they just wanted to forget this entire thing. And he's the one that really fought to get it made, and he had to fight for it. And I'm glad it was made. I just think that, like we said, it's an ill-conceived great idea.
Yeah.
Sort of.
And like I said, when we started, I remember really liking this movie. So when it came out, there were things about this movie that blew us away, especially the special effects, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The aspect ratio change was a big deal about it, and all of that. So, and that's probably a good segue to keys, because my first key is aspect ratio change, which is in Westworld. If you watch the seasons of Westworld, they do things with that to give clues to the audience that you don't know are clues until later on.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
which is the aspect ratio change.
We've actually covered a movie, I think this season, that did something similar too. I just can't remember what it was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Either that or we talked about one that we've seen recently. Yeah. The ones that I've already mentioned, Short Circuit,
Yeah.
which is just cheesy 80s robotics. Another thriller from the 80s that this movie reminds me of is like War Games.
Oh, yeah. I've got War Games.
Yeah. But the biggest key I have, and this is really my last one, is not even, it's not a relation. Well, yeah, it is a relation. It's coincidental. It's a coincidental key, and it's about another troubled production as a result of a death, and that's Twilight Zone, the movie, which came out at about the same time. Vic Morrow was killed. Him and two kids were killed in a helicopter accident directed by John Landis, and it stained that movie big time. Very much the way Natalie Wood's death stained this movie.
Well, you also had Brandon Lee. That was another one that comes to
mind.
mind.
Yeah, that's another good one, The Crow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
Again,
and that's a good movie.
Movies released after an actor died.
Yeah.
In it. And I'm
so
sure
that's
there's others
the key,
we're not mentioning, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not like what we normally do where it's an influence. It's more of just a relation as far as a key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a few. Virtual reality we discussed a little bit, I think, as a general key going forward, but a good representation would be like Ready Player One, where once you're put into this virtual world, it feels real to you and you can be affected by it and all that, which goes back to the whole Matrix of if you die in the Matrix, you die in real life. And I wonder if they got that from this movie. Even though she's dying and it goes, but if you put that tape on, you'll die. Jurassic Park, just because, just like in Jurassic Park, there's an internal person in his office who's selling secrets to the military and selling secrets up the line, corporate espionage.
Ned Landry, wasn't that his name?
Yeah, Ned Landry. Yeah, very good. This should be a Black Mirror episode because it's that type of technology being done for the wrong things. So it's a very Black Mirror feel to it.
Technology gone or turned dark or whatever.
Yep. Another 80s one that we didn't give was Dreamscape, except it's not technology, but the idea that you can tap into someone else's dream and manipulate it and change it.
It's so funny. I was going to bring that up after you got through because it occurred to me that it had similar things, but I was thinking it was the title. I was wanting to say it was called Brainscape.
Yeah,
but it's Dreamscape.
Yeah. And that is a direct key and influence on Inception, which is the Christopher Nolan one, which is essentially the same thing of we're going into people's minds and their dreams and manipulating them, their perception.
Yeah. So maybe they don't need to remake this. It's apparently a lot of people have been inspired by it.
Have been inspired by it. And the only other thing I've got, knowing the author of this, I'm sure he stole it like he does everything else, Avatar, because in Avatar, they're manipulating things remotely through this technology. So it's taking it to the other extreme of I'm able to not only experience what that is, I'm able to control something else over there. And I think that's all I have. Although I think, again, I said 2001 because I think that Trumbull was wanting a 2001 ending with the whole angels flying into the white light thing, but it didn't come off in the same way that the ambiguity of 2001 is.
Well, it would be a key because of his relation to it anyway.
Well, true. And then my last one is it's a trivia thing, not a key, but the temp score. A lot of times when a director finishes his cut, he puts temp music to it because the composer naturally hasn't done the music yet. And there have been some instances where temp scores have ended up being primary scores. I think Aliens is a good example. That score is used in, I think, 3 other movies, which is James Horner, which I found interesting in doing research because for the temp score of this, they used The Abyss and the music in The Abyss. And So when Silvestri, again, another James Horner score, but Alan Silvestri did the music to this. So basically, he just transposed it and used the same music from The Abyss for this.
Are you
so
kidding me? It ripped off The Abyss?
Yeah. So if you watch The Abyss and watch this, you'll hear the same music beats.
Well, then that is definitely a key because they're using the same music. That's crazy.
Yeah, he just transposed it and used the same meter, the same tempo, the same melodies.
Is he a hack? Did he do other stuff like that?
Well,
Or
Alan
has he done
Silvestri
any
is
good
not-
music?
Let me look up.
That's just, I don't know, it's aggravating when you think about it. It's very James Cameron, as you said. Let's just lift elements.
And technology-wise, we could always talk about Apple's glasses. They have Apple Vision Pro or Oculus or any of that is all directly influenced by this too, because you're wearing these headsets to augment your reality and or to change your reality. Silvestri has some good themes, a lot of good themes. This must have been back when he said, I'm not going to do that. Oh, wait, I've got that totally wrong. Flip it. James Horner took Alan Silvestri's score.
Really? Because James Horner is good.
Yeah.
He did Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan.
No, 83. No, it's the opposite way. I was right to begin with. Alan
I was going to
Silvestri
say, that
because-
doesn't sound like Horner at all.
Yeah.
Horner I equate with like the real big one, John Williams.
Yeah. But Alan Silvestri has like Back to the Future. He does a lot of Zemeckis stuff. So Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, Polar Express. He does all of his movies.
The Forrest Gump's music was not that bad.
No, it's not bad.
Okay.
Well, and Back to the Future is very iconic music.
Yeah. Well,
So yeah, that was what I heard, and that's
what we
a
got,
brainstorm.
folks. We are firmly back into sci-fi and horror world with these last couple of episodes we did. We did the Betty Davis, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane last week, and now we're into Brainstorm this week. And going forward, I don't even think we have any more of the suspense or fantasy going forward, do we?
Maybe not.
No, it's all sci-fi and horror throughout the rest of the season, the way it should be.
Yeah, the way it should be.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. Did you have opinions about this movie? Have you seen this movie? A lot of you folks out there probably don't even know what this movie is because it did kind of get swept under the rug, 40 years ago? 40-something years ago?
Yeah.
But anyway, we'd like to hear your thoughts regardless. If you like what you see and hear, we would love for you to write a review, give us a thumbs up. You can always go check out our other shows. We've got some shorts on YouTube, or you can hop over to Patreon if you want to really help us out and join one of those tiers where we do some additional shows, including a Star Trek show that's Star Trek the Original Series. We've got 2 seasons in on that, all of the episodes individually covered, as well as we're going into the 4th season of the X-Files over there as well. But there's free stuff over there too if you want to check out some other stuff just to see what's going on. And until next week, David, when we are going to be in the horror world, and it's actually a movie that you suggested, so that'll give everybody a good teaser there. I will be seeing you then.
I'll see you then.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.